Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. The Trump administration quietly cut a deal with Tehran. Up to 400 Iranians detained for illegal entry are being shipped back. Trump's new TrumpRx.gov program promises cheaper meds by partnering with Pfizer. The federal government has ground to a halt again. This is the shutdown that we are referring to. Wounded Knee. Over 250 Lakota men, women, and children were gunned down by U.S. troops in the winter snow. Now, despite protests, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says soldiers involved in the Wounded Knee massacre will keep their medals of honors. This is totally despicable. So let's talk about what's barely making the news, because the U.S. is deporting hundreds of Iranian nationals. Now, these aren't just travelers. These are individuals who enter the country illegally. Yes, illegally. But the move to send them directly back to Iran under a quiet bilateral agreement has civil liberties groups lighting up the alarm bells. And I know most of you guys probably asking why. Because Iran is known for its harsh treatment of dissenters, and some fear that these deportees could face imprisonment or worse, or even be put to death. And the deal is controversial. No congressional vote, little transparency, and yet another reminder that immigration policies under this administration is reactive at best. Is this a national security move or just political cleanup? And we all know how the Iranian government are on some things. We can be very critical of this particular government, how they treat dissenters. So a lot of these people will probably be put in prison. These are, in my opinion, I don't have too much information, just on the surface, are true refugees. Anytime you're running from Iran, it's probably you are a 100% guaranteed refugees and or a spy. And this is just kind of my conjecture in regards to this story. But again, I wanted you guys to look at this because we're talking about 400 people who have left the Iranian country for a better way of life. Now, if they enter the country illegally, should they be deported? Absolutely. Should they be in a holding pattern? Now, this is one of those very difficult stories for me because, again, you came inside the country illegally, but in some regards you had to, because if you tried to do legal refugee, then you probably would have been captured, detained, put to death by your own government. Again, political asylum, where you have fear from your fear of persecution from your own government, that constitutes as a refugee or an asylum seeker. So again, I'll keep you guys abreast and updated on that story as well, because I'm really indifferent about that one as well. Now, here's some good news, ladies and gentlemen, and believe me, we don't get too much good news since this new administration has been in office, other than illegal immigrants being deported because they're in the country illegally. But things that the people, no matter what political party you're on, if you're liberal, you're conservative, doesn't matter, right? And right here on Blacklogic, I don't take a side of what political party. We're talking about the truth. But the good thing about this is that Pfizer partners with Trump. But what's the real cost? Now, Donald Trump just dropped a bombshell because a brand new government website called TrumpRx.gov, in partnership with big pharma titan like Pfizer, and is being marketed as a bold solution to the drug pricing crisis. And Americans can supposedly get their prescriptions for 50 to 85% off. And that sounds great, right? But we're going to dig a little bit deeper, because in exchange, Pfizer gets a 3-year break on tariffs, plus promise of future incentives if they manufacture more meds in the United States. And some are calling it a political stunt that's wrapped in a Band-Aid, no pun intended. Now, others say it's a Trump delivering on his America First promise. But the real question is, are everyday folks actually going to feel their savings, or just another corporate handshake disguised as reform? But look at what the federal government had to do for Pfizer. No tariffs, even though that your prescription drugs are being made in countries where, let's take, for instance, penicillin. I don't know the current price of penicillin. I'm going to throw an arbitrary number out for an example. Let's say in America, a vial or a bottle of prescription penicillin costs $50 a bottle. In another country, it's costs $5. Pfizer is getting their drugs made in these other countries where penicillin is costing $5, but they bring it back to America. You tack on a little bit tax from import-export tax. It should cost no more than $15, maybe $20, but Pfizer was charging $50. That is the example that I'm giving you. And look what the Trump administration had to do. They had to give them all these incentives and future promises. And if you make your meds in America, we'll give you tax breaks, this, that, and the other, which I do agree. If you're going to come back to America, you should have some incentives, but we're talking about a reduction in price. Let's look at the overall of the entire story. Is this a good thing for American citizens? Yes, because we're talking about a reduction in price from 50 to 85%. But when we're talking from the business perspective and the business acumen of this, it's not that great of a deal because Pfizer is basically going to keep their same profit margins as if they were getting these drugs made overseas. So again, I do applaud the Trump administration, President Trump, on making this deal happen because this is a good deal, no less. Now, they have discounted prices, and this is the one thing that I kind of just giggled at and frowned upon at the same time, is that they're going to call the site TrumpRx.gov. President Trump is a representation of a businessman of these United States of America. And he continues. It don't matter if he's in the private sector now that he's in the public sector as a commander in chief, the president of the United States, POTUS as we call him. He keeps stamping his name on every single thing. Now, some of you who love Trump, who are on the side of Trump, you have no problem with them calling TrumpRx.gov. I really don't have a problem with the name, but man, is this arrogant. I mean, you continue to stamp your name on everything as if you have no Congress, you have no Senate, you have no country. This is not your business. Well, I take that back. The United States Corporation is a business, and President Trump is the CEO. So I digress. I just realized that. My apologies. Now, under this deal, Pfizer agreed to charge the same price for new drugs in developed countries and the U.S. Now, that is remarkable. But believe me, Pfizer is not going to be losing any money. As I told you, they're getting tariff breaks. They're getting incentives. They're getting future promises. But to have these prices to be reduced by 50 to 85%, that means that everyday Americans can now afford all of these Pfizer drugs. Wow, that is going to be remarkable. Now, the government shutdown. Ladies and gentlemen, how many times do we continue have to go through this? Because here we go again. Another government shutdown. How many have we had so far? Now, Congress couldn't get a funding bill across the finish line, and now millions of federal workers are stuck in limbo. That's over 750,000 employees potentially furloughed, and furloughed is basically like you still have your job, you might as well go home because we're not going to pay you. We'll call you back once we have the money to pay you guys so you can work. Or a lot of these people are going to be working without pay. Essential workers, we're talking active duty military. I was a component of that when I was serving. And when they told me, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a true story, when they told me, yeah, you still have to come in and work even though that you may not be getting paid on the 15th, I told my captain, I said, sir, I'm not coming in if I'm not getting paid. Well, you have an obligation, you have a duty to do so. And I said, sir, I understand what you're talking about, but I live paycheck to paycheck. I was a broke soldier. I'm not gonna lie, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't budgeting my money right. And yeah, a lot of you guys would be like, that's on me. You have duty to this country. You have duty to the service. I know all of that. But one thing, when they tell you about this duty and honor, code of conduct and standing up and being a great example for other soldiers and Marines, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a capitalist society. We don't make anything shake. We don't make anything move without money. So how are you to have me to go to war, to come in and do PT and do all these tasks, and where my family is hungry, or where I don't have gas in my tank? I have all these things that I need to take care of. Are you going to foot the bill on that, sir? Are you going to do that, ma'am? Because that was the questions I was having. I said, hey, listen, I'm not trying to be in a bad example, because I know certain negative talk amongst the ranks at somebody with my rank could infuse and inspire people to do the same. So when I didn't get paid, I stayed at home. They called me up. They said, Sergeant Ross, why are you not at work? You know, not that I was missing movement because we didn't have an exercise or being deployed, but they said they called you out of ranks. I said, yeah, I didn't get paid. They said, you need to get your tail in here. They use some other obscene language. I said, well, I don't have any gas in my car. Did you know that my captain drove to my house and picked me up? And I told him I got into a uniform. I sat at my desk, and I know a lot of you're a disgrace. No, I was broke. And we live in a capitalist society now. Some of you are going to take my side, and some of you are going to be like, what a disgrace. I served my country abroad. Okay, I've had over two rotations in Iraq. So I don't want to hear anything from anybody. I served my country, and I sacrificed my life for this country. So when you don't pay me, because people would tell you, oh, I joined the military because this is a family tradition. You know, my father and his father's father and my great-grandfather and his father's father all joined the military. So we are patriots. We are red-blooded Americans willing to die and lay down for this country. Then you have other people who didn't have anywhere else to go, who would have been homeless, who would have been hungry. They served the military. They say, well, I'd rather serve my country than die on the streets. Then you have people who join the military for college funding, for college money. No matter some people join the military because they had sick family members and they could list them as a dependent so the military can pay for them. Either way, when you raise your right hand, you take the oath and you join the armed forces and you put on that uniform, majority of people join for a better way of life. Are there some people who are financially off that join because of patriotism and family tradition? Absolutely. Are there some people who joined the military for more than one reason? Yes, I was one of those. I was one of those because I wanted to join and serve my country. But two, I joined because I wanted money. And not that the military pays people a lot of money, but when you're talking about free health care, free dental care, those things add up. And those things you never really work out, because when military members retire or they ETS, they get out the military, we don't have any sense of what what certain operations and procedures and medical visits actually cost, because everything for us is free. We don't worry about copay. We're worried about being a visitor. We're not worried about getting a bill in the mail. Those things we just don't worry about because we don't pay for anything when it comes to healthcare, vision, nope, dental, nope, medical, no, we don't worry about it. So again, I'm just kind of letting you guys open on the little things that may occur amongst the ranks sometimes, where people like me, like, hey, listen, part of my contract told me that you'll give me 3 cots, meaning, 3 hots, meaning 3 hot meals a day. And you might have to use your MRE heater to heat up that meal, because not all of them will be fresh food. That may come from an MRE, which is meal ready to eat. You see those brown packages that soldiers carry around with food, and shelter and a paycheck. No one's joining the U.S. Armed Forces without getting paid. Let me ask you a question for you guys who may be blowing up my comment section after this video is posted. You're a patriot. You're a red-blooded American. You love this country. You love everything it stands for according to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Code of Conduct, everything. Let's say, for instance, you are low middle class. You're a middle class. You come from a family like that, so they don't really have money to foot the bill on anything. You have to pay your own way and obtain your own things. Would you join any military armed force, the Air Force, the Army, United States Marine Corps, even the Coast Guard, the Navy? Would you join those if they did not pay you absolutely nothing? Now, they gave you uniforms, they gave you a place to stay, they fed you, but they never paid you any money. Everything that you received from them was this issue. Now, I got it. Some of you was like, as long as they paid for my toiletries, my personal hygiene items, but they paid for nothing else. Like, they didn't pay for you to get personal clothing. You wore military underwear, military pants each and every day of your service. They didn't pay for you to go out to a restaurant off base. They didn't pay for you when you take vacation, you go on leave for you to go to Six Flags, amusement park, Disney World, to go visit a family member. They didn't pay for any of that. They only issue you things for you to be a soldier. Would you then join the military? That is my question. So, as I was stating, there has been over 750 employees potentially furloughed or working without pay. And agencies are halting services. And these are paused, and yet Congress still cashes their checks. Don't forget, Congress and the president still gets their money. This isn't just a gridlock. It's paralyzing. It's yet another example of government so divided and dysfunctional, they can't even keep their lights on. And guess what? You and I are the ones left footing the bill with nothing to show for it. And that is why I gave you my personal account of this particular story. Now, a lot of you guys may be asking, what could this potentially affect? And I ask the same questions each and every year because some things just change because the legislation that's been passed throughout that particular year or previous years will have some people to get paid, some people not to get paid, some people to be furloughed, some people to be laid off, etc. Because it's not just politics. This hits home. Veterans may not get their services that they depend on. Families relying on food stamps, they're going to be delayed in some cases. Now, this may take time, but usually if this legislation for the new fiscal plan, the new budget plan for America is not signed within 30 days, veterans will not get paid. Food stamps will not be replenished. And I know a lot of you like, well, I don't care about no food stamps because people should be living off the government anyway. But there's different reasons why people have food stamps. And believe it or not, a lot of your friends, a lot of your loved ones have depended on food stamps back in the day or even today to, again, level their income so they can live a decent life. National parks, they'll be closed. TSA agents, air traffic controllers, they're forced to work without pay. Why am I saying that? They're similar to the military because they are essential workers. You guys are still going to be flying around this great nation internationally. And guess what we need? We need TSA agents and we need those air traffic controllers. They're forced to work without pay because guess what? They have to show up. And if they don't show up, they will get laid off and get fired. And they will not get their jobs back. They are not getting furloughed. Now, the FFA is furloughing over 11,000 employees. So if you're flying soon, good luck. Good luck to you all because the ripple effect here is huge, and it's proof that while DC bickers, the American people bear the consequences. We're talking about real lives, real pain, and all because our leaders can't get it together. Isn't this the constant? I'm just going to show you guys some of the things here according to the report from NPR. As I stated before, air traffic controllers, TSA agents are essential workers. They'll be forced to get paid. Now, the U.S. Passport Agency will remain open. Now, in the green, these are good things. The U.S. Postal Service will keep the mail moving as usual. Social Security and other benefits will continue. There may be some delayed in services, as they state. Now, first to feel the pinch are those people who are on SNAP and WIC, who had infants, which a lot of these people actually depend on. They says WIC at risk of rapidly running out of its funds. A prolonged federal government shutdown or more than 1 week puts these families at risk. And then the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, we also know that as SNAP, will last longer, but also can run out of funds. Federal workers in active duty military service who will not receive a paycheck during the government shutdown. Federal employees, in addition to furlough notices in the case of a shutdown, meaning that you had your job, but you might as well stay at home because we're not going to pay you. And they will not be back paid, by the way. First full paycheck miss for federal employees will be October 24th. Listen in, October 24th, if they don't sign anything into law by then. While the military, it will be October 15th. So they roughly have 14 days. Today is the first. Only salaries that the federal government are obligated to pay according to the Constitution during the government shutdown will be members of Congress and the president. I know, shocker. Federal employees and military members will get back pay once the shutdown is over. Yeah, did I get back pay? Absolutely, I did. Why is this important? Now, we understand we have to pay Congress and the president so they can come to office and reach a deal, reach legislation, pass it into law, so the American economy, the American government can be funded for yet again another year. But why not the military? Why isn't this passed into law that active duty, reserves, National Guard, and I know National Guards by the state, but still the National Guard, as well as retirees, continue to get paid just like Congress and the president? Because think about soldiers like myself, and that's why I gave you my story. What if critical MOSs? What about critical leadership in the military decide, you know what, you're not going to pay me, I'm not coming in? This is a capitalist society, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, it has to do more about duty and honor and obligation and loyalty. And okay, yeah, but we need money to pay for things. We need money. Are you going to tell my landlord, or going to tell my banker that pays my mortgage to that, hey, I'm going to miss this month? Well, you should be better with your finances. We all should be better with our finances. We're not rich. But unfortunately, we live in a country where a majority of the people are not rich. Majority of people are like in the middle class, the lower middle class. And in that middle class, people are living paycheck to paycheck. Should we do better as Americans? Absolutely. But let's just be realistic for a moment. Let's stop debunking our own selves. Let's stop contradicting our own selves. Why would I continue to drive into work each and every day like a TSA agent, like an air traffic controller, if I don't have the gas? Well, you guys can carpool. I'm just kind of giving you guys some of the excuses that I hear from people, but the realism of this is not that real at all. I mean, at the least, we need to have our veterans, active duty military, our reserves, anything dealing with the armed forces. Those guys, those men, those women need to be paid regardless of what goes on with this government. We need to be protected at all times. So again, think about it. What if had the military say, you know what? You don't want to pay us? We're not coming in. We're laying down our arms. We're taking off our uniforms until you pay us, and then we'll report in. What if we didn't get invaded by China? And China links up, and again, this is just for an example. China links up with North Korea. China links up with Russia. China links up with India. China links up with Turkey. How do you think America would fare after such an invasion? Simply because the Constitution didn't write in the armed forces. Should there be an amendment? Should there be a revision of the Constitution? Absolutely. At least the military, ladies and gentlemen. At least the military. Am I impartial behind that? Nope. I'm definitely siding with my brothers and sisters in arms. Absolutely. Okay. This is only the salaries for the government obligated to pay, again, is to Congress and those military members. So yeah, this is crazy, because this is absolutely a ripple effect, and it's huge. And it's proof that while DC bickers the American people, we're paying the consequences behind this. Now, I wanted to show you guys, just in case if you guys follow politics, similar to of those government officials that voted for to pass the budget, and those voted no against the budget. Okay. And we're talking about, here's how the U.S. Senate voted on the Republican plan. Okay. This is how they voted on the Republican plan. So 55 voted yes, requires 60% of the vote to pass. Okay. Keep that in mind. We're only at 55. Now, all of these are Republicans in red that voted yes. Okay. Ron, who was this up here? David McCormick. I'm just Eric Shim. Let's see, Thomas Tillis, Todd Young, Rick Scott. Okay. We got all of these people that voted yes. Ted Cruz of Texas. Now, the Democrats that voted yes was Catherine Masto and John Fetterman. John Fetterman might as well just be a Republican, by the way. And then independent Angus King. Okay. Now we come down to the Democrats. We got all of these Democrats voting no. Again, they're going to make this two-sided. They're like, oh, those Democrats are the ones who shut down the government because they didn't agree with the Republicans. Ladies and gentlemen, this happens all the time. And then the one Republican, Rand Paul of Kentucky, said, nope, this is not a good budget plan. And then Bernie Sanders, of course, because he mostly votes Democrat anyway. And to kind of give you guys the names of the people, and what I mean by the names of people who are responsible for the government shutdown, I'm referring to both the Republicans and the Democrats, because nobody is compromising. When they vote on legislation to pass the new budget for the new fiscal year, this is all negotiating. This is all making a deal, but most of this is about compromises. And this is what the Republicans do not want to do. They don't want to compromise with the Democrats, and the Democrats do not want to compromise with the Republicans. The Democrats say, well, you're cutting out 1.4, 2.4 billion of Medicaid, and we have so many people to be laid off and so many millions of Americans who are not being covered under Medicaid since the Trump administration has come into office. And the Trump administration say where there's been fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid, and we're just cutting off that fat. We only want Americans who have these ailments and these diseases and viruses who truly need the aid to get this money from the government, and not just giving all these other fraudulent and scammers the money that has kind of been feeding these very scandalous pots of these empty black holes where government money has been gone. That's why, you know, the American debt is at what, 37, 38 trillion dollars and counting. So that's why you should never, in my opinion, you guys probably, you're going to do what you want, take us out when it comes to government, because the Republicans are going to say it's the Democrats' fault, and the Democrats are going to say it's the Republicans' fault. Republicans say they try to put a lot of pork belly spinning inside the bill, and the Democrats say, well, we're doing it for the people. And both of them are true, and both of them are false. Because within some of the statements and the arguing back and forth about the reasons why some voted no and some voted yes, believe me, some of it pertains to truth, and some of it pertains to lies. And the American people, we're the always ones feeling the pinch, and we're the ones always feeling the pain. So this is what I'm referring to, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about real lives and real pain, and it's all because of our leaders, because they cannot get it together. They cannot get it together, okay? So let me blow this up for you guys. I know if you guys are familiar with the Wounded Knee Massacre. Now, it states here that violent conflicts between Native American groups and the U.S. military were common throughout many territories. We're going to cover some of those very quickly. One of the last military actions against Native Americans of the Northern Plains took place on December 29th, 1890. The government officials banned a growing religion. The government, listen, officials banned a growing religion as a ghost dance on a South Dakota reservation that month. What is important about this? The Constitution was written the year 1787. It got ratified, I believe, in 1788. So we're almost talking about 80 to 100 years that the Constitution has already been in place, but they don't have the right to practice their own religion on their reservation. Okay, because it says right here, the ghost dance on a South Dakota reservation that month. As part of the crackdown against the ghost dance, soldiers from the 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment arrested a band of Lakota who were traveling towards the Pine Ridge Reservation and confined them to a camp near Wounded Knee Creek. The day after the arrest, I'm just blowing this up for you guys on your cell phones. The day after the arrest, the military attempted to recover weapons from the imprisoned refugees. A gun was discharged. No one was shot. No military member was shot. A gun was discharged, and the soldiers opened fire. When the shooting stopped, hundreds of Lakota men and women were dead. And they had the account that it was 250 of men, women, and children who perished behind this tragedy. Okay? So as I stated, these were 250 Lakota men, women, and children that was slaughtered by the U.S. troops, the 7th Cavalry. And it came under the guise of disarming the tribe, and instead opened fire on civilians. And many died trying to flee, by the way. Do not forget, no Army soldier was shot. They were actually giving up their arms to a certain degree. And at that time, I can understand during this very vital time that some of them soldiers may believe they were getting tricked or ambushed, because a lot of Native Americans during that time did that. But nonetheless, a lot of them got killed fleeing. Now, others froze to death in the aftermath. It was one of the darkest chapters in U.S. history. But unlike other tragedies, Wounded Knee rarely gets discussed. And worse, it was called a battle by our government, which awarded medals of honor to nearly 20 soldiers involved in this massacre. I want you guys to really let that sink in. Because as we fast forward today, 135 years later, and those medals of honor still stand. And this week, Pete Hegseth said that these soldiers will keep their medals. Wow. 250 Native Americans, men, women, and children of the Lakota tribe, while attempting to disarm Native American fighters who had already surrendered at the camp. We were making it clear that those soldiers deserve those medals, Hegseth said in the video, before adding that their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. Well, you might as well give the Nazi German soldiers medals as well. Give them medals as well. Give the KKK medals of honors. Give all the white supremacist gangs and factions and extreme groups in America medals as well. The U.S. government has deemed and labeled this as a massacre, that no U.S. Army troop was harmed, but yet they killed 250 men, women, and children who were laying down their arms. One arbitrary, indiscriminate shot in the air that nobody was harmed started a massacre of 250 people. But yet you believe that these soldiers, while the Constitution was already implemented in these United States of America, that they deserve a Medal of Honor. That's a goddamn disgrace. And I'm saying that from a proud Marine and a proud soldier myself. He goes on to state that after the fighting, Medals of Honor were given to 20 soldiers from the 7th Cavalry Regiment, and their awards cite a range of actions, including bravery, efforts to rescue fellow troops, and actions to dislodge Lakota Indians who were concealed in a raven. Wow. Well, let's go over some of this. And I know I'm going to have some people, even though I'm a soldier myself, a Marine myself, are going to say, well, you don't know everything. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Here are some of the massacres of the U.S. military. And I'm not going to read all through these, but we may highlight some of, the massacres and the numbers, the casualties here. Sand Creek Massacre, 1864, U.S. Army. Bear River Massacre, 1863, U.S. Army. They killed hundreds of people, by the way, in Idaho. Wounded Knee, we just covered that. Boscari Massacre, American soldiers in Sicily killed 75 Italian and German prisoners of war. They were prisoners of war. Where's the code of conduct? Or the Geneva Convention in that case. Not the code of conduct. That's more so if you're a prisoner of war yourself and how you should conduct yourself, but more the Geneva Convention. Liberation Reprisal 1945. U.S. soldiers killed surrendering German SSS guards. Chernoghy Massacre 1945. They executed 80 German prisoners. No Gun Re Massacre in 1950. U.S. forces killed up to 400 South Korean civilians near the village of No Gun Re. My La Massacre in 1968. U.S. Army soldiers of the American Division killed between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians in the Vietnamese hamlet of My La. Again, these massacres go on and on and on. U.S. Marines killed 24 unarmed Iraqi civilians in that town there. Qatar Massacre, Staff Sergeant Robert left his base and killed 16 Afghani civilians, including 9 children. Well, that's totally different. One man taking upon himself to inflict mass genocide, being basically a mass shooter wearing the uniform. So this kind of combines what I was saying about the 2 former Marines, both 40 years of age, both served in Iraq last year, took it upon themselves to, over this past weekend, to kill innocent people. One crashed into the Church of Latter-day Saints and killed roughly 3 to 4 people. Another one came up on a boat and was shooting people. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that is what we're talking about here today. Now, how are these violations, right? Because the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, was not enacted until 1951, by the way. So it did not exist back in 1890 in regards to Wounded Knee. But I wanted to point out that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that the military will not rescind the awards given to the soldiers who carried out the Wounded Knee massacre. And Native American leaders are outraged. They call this not just a slap in the face, but a continued act of violence against their memory and their right. Keeping these medals isn't honoring courage, it's institutionalizing a lie. When we decorate injustice, we legitimize it. Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're legitimizing it. This isn't just about history. It's about who choose to honor and who we erase. The reason why this is important to me is because they're doing the same thing when it comes to Black history and all these success and achievements that we have made. I digress. Now, to say that these soldiers will have been subject to the Article of War, this is if the UCMJ was acted, prior to 1890, and they will be upheld to these standards. It says, which contains some of the same core principles as the later UCMJ. Under these principles, and today's UCMJ, the actions that Wounded Knee will be likely considered violations of several articles. Okay, Article 118, murder. Article 119, manslaughter. They would have been charged on all these charges, but yet Pete Hegseth want them to keep their Medal of Honors. Okay. Article 134 is kind of one of those general articles that cover anything that they can't name. Dereliction of duty, the excessive force and failure to protect non-combatants. So since the UCMJ just came about in 1951, they would not have been upheld to these standards, these laws. But according to the Constitution, because the Constitution was ratified in 1788, this massacre happened in 1890. So Fifth Amendment, due process. Soldiers denied due process to the Lakota people. Due process requires fair treatment through the judicial system. Fourth Amendment, unreasonable seizure. Okay, and this is another occurrence that happened in Wounded Knee, where they were occupying. Again, this all was kind of extenuating from 1890. And then the Supremacy Clause and the treaty violation, the Treaty of Fort Laramie of 1868 that happened before 1890, by the way, it recognized the sovereignty of the Lakota people and protected their land. And so by invading their territory because of some ghost dance and massacring them, the soldiers participated in the direct violation of this treaty, which is the supreme law of the land under Article 6 of the Constitution. I want you guys to think about that. A lot of these treaties went in place to keep Native Americans on reservations, and the U.S. military infiltrated this reservation because of a ghost dance, because of a religion that they were practicing on their own land that the U.S. government allowed them to have under these treaties. So the government can then form the most powerful nation in the world, the land of the Native Americans, which also include Black Native Americans, and then also built upon the backs of enslaved Black people. They built this country wealth. So they were on the reservation practicing whatever religion, whatever traditions, and they invaded this reservation and killed them over religion, supposedly. There's always more to this than what's on the surface. I wonder, are there any natural resources that was on that land? Why they violated this treaty? Because this treaty was in place in 1868. The massacre of Wounded Knee happened in 1890. No persecution that happened to the soldiers. The government took the opposite course, awarding medals of honor to many soldiers involved in the massacre. Subsequent efforts, while no soldiers were punished, later actions included a congressional resolution expressing deep regret in 1990, and ongoing efforts to revoke the medals reflect the modern recognition of injustice that occurred. So, Pete Hegseth, Department of War Chief, said nope, they're going to keep their Medal of Honors. So those subsequent efforts are now quelled. That will no longer happen. Government shutdown. Mass killers getting awarded Medal of Honors even to this day, hundreds of years later. This is your news for today.